I'm Mike Wilson.
And I'm Jevin Vine, and we're part of the Thompsons Agronomy Solutions team here today with you. Excited to be here. Beautiful day outside of Chatham, Ontario. We're in a cornfield. The corn is roughly at V4 stage, and we're here today to talk to you about a new type of soil sampling that's exclusive to Thompsons.
That's right, Jevin. This new test we offer uses resin technology to measure 14 different essential nutrients for the plant. It measures nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, magnesium, as well as all other micronutrients that can affect crop growth throughout the growing season. So Jevin, can you tell us how this exciting new technology works?
Yeah, Mike. This technology, really what it does is it acts just like a root does.
So what you're saying is this new technology actually measures the available amount of nutrients in the soil solution itself.
Correct.
It's not actually giving you the total amount of nutrients available in the soil as we would get from a standard soil test.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good point. So what it's doing is we like to describe this test as something in between a regular soil test and something in between a tissue test. So what this is doing is telling us what's available to the plant. A regular soil test, whether you're doing a bulk, whether you're doing a site-specific, or whether you're doing a zone, that kind of test will show you the total amount of nutrients available in the soil. But what it won't do is it won't tell you what is actually available to the plant, like this test will show you.
Right. So if we're actually measuring the soil water, we should see an indication of a nutrient deficiency or stress to the plant sooner than we would with a tissue test.
Yeah.
Is that what we've seen? Or?
Yeah, that's correct. So we've actually done lots of experiments with growers actually last year as well. And with this test, we are able to detect deficiencies before a plant tissue test will see it.
Yes.
And once we all know that once a deficiency is noted inside of a plant, usually yield has been lost. And correcting an issue like that can be difficult in season unless it's a foliar or usually it'll be something in the fall you'll correct. So really what this test does is it helps us to see a problem before the plant actually sees it.
Yeah, and if it's a major deficiency that we're getting, you know, from a major nutrient, it might not be correctable in crop with a foliar or something, but will allow us to target that area and create a better solution through a fertility program for upcoming years to come.
That is correct. So Mike, I'm just wondering if you could share with our growers, what are the 4 biggest uses of this test, you know, depending on the stage of crop, etc.
Sure, Jevin. Yeah, I would say there are 4 major uses. The first one would be a pre-season setup to determine residual nitrogen carryover from the year before to help fine-tune and tweak your fertility program coming into the upcoming season. The second, I would say, would be a pre-digest nitrogen test, which is very similar to the field we're standing in here today. At that 6-leaf stage, we can accurately measure and see where we're at on a nitrogen level and try to fine-tune that recommendation going into the side dressing window. The third area I would recommend would be measuring problem areas in the crop. You could pair this with our imagery services with the drone to fly over the field, identify your strong and weak areas, follow up with a test like this to determine whether it's a nutrient deficiency causing the problem or some other underlying feature that can be dealt with at a later date. And then the fourth and last case would be post-season, you know, anytime after the maximum vegetation state when everything's right. So, you know, prior grain fill and corn, if you want to wait to harvest, that's fine. And it allows us to measure the amount of nutrients left over at the end of the season to begin trying to tweak those recommendations, you know, see if there's an abundance of N or if nitrogen ran short. You know, we measure some of the other major nutrients to see if there's any problems we can fix and adjust that fertility program to try to get the most we can out of every acre on your farm. So Jevin, now that we've kind of explained to the growers the 4 areas that would best fit this type of testing, what crops would you use it on?
Yeah, that's a good question, Mike. Really this test can be used across multiple array of crops. Usually the most popular ones that growers will use will be corn, will be soybeans. We've done it in a bit of wheat fields. We also really like to do specialty crops, so things like tomato, tobacco, just to see what's going on in certain specialty crops like that. This would be a really good fit. And like you were talking about with the 4 different stages, often that correlates with lots of different crops. We have all kinds of different stages throughout the growth season on a multiple array of crops. And this test can be used really at any timing to see what's going on in the soil, what nutrients are being available to the plant, and ultimately we could detect, again, if there's issues, things like that.
Okay, let's see, Jevin, where are we at here? So we've got, you actually went down 17 inches that time, and that was relatively simple, actually.
Relatively simple, yeah. So we only need to capture 12 inches of that sample for our nitrate test.
So now, would you break this sample up into like a top 6 inch and then a 6 to 12 inch to show the different nutrient levels?
Yep, and we've done that for a lot of growers. What we'll do is we can go 0 to 6, and we can also go 6 to 12, and actually we can go from 12 to 18 since we have it now. And what we can do is we can start to track the amount of parts per million in that top 0 to 6, then the next 6 to 12, the parts per million in that section, and so on.
So Jevin, now that we've seen you pull a core from the soil, how many cores would you take to get a good representation of the area you're trying to find?
Yeah, another great question, Mike. What we like to do when we soil sample, we like to take 12 cores, and those 12 cores are going to get blended together in a pail, and we're going to get a representation from that pail, and that's what's going to go into our soil solution vial. How I would do this is I would like to select certain zones in the field, if that's one way we're going to do it. So I would like to take a zone on a high knoll, I'd like to take one on a medium part of the farm, and probably on a low part of the farm to kind of see what's going on, and again, 12 cores would get taken from each zone there. Another way to do it is if you have a site-specific soil sample, so you've actually sampled in specific parts of your farm, we can go back to those points and we can soil sample there and then equate that to the soil test as well. So we got two kind of things to tell us a story of what's going on on the farm. So Mike, I'm going to pretend I'm a grower, all right, and I took a soil test this spring, and it showed me that I had a really high level of parts per million of potassium. But then when you did this test, it showed me that my levels of potassium were actually were quite low and not really available to the plant. What could be happening with an issue like this?
Well, you could be on one of those soil types that really binds potassium tightly. It's just physically not available and releasing to the crop fast enough. This test allows us to show how much of the potassium is being released in the soil solution and what percentage of the other nutrients are there and could be potentially affecting this problem. This makes timing very important for this test. Field history, grower knowledge, and things like that are very important to make sure we hit the spots and target the crucial areas of the field and make sure we do it at the right time. So working with your agricultural consultant to make sure we hit the timing right in those problem areas will help make sure we can identify the problems and make the correct recommendation to the customer. So Jevin, we've just sampled this field and we'll expect to see the results back in 6 to 8 days from the lab.
That's right, yep.
What do you expect to see, and how do we carry that recommendation on that sheet through to the grower to get a product on the ground? Yeah,
so when we get the results back, we're obviously going to see a level in pounds per acre for each of the nutrients that we tested for.
Sure.
So what we can do is we can look at our crop goal, at our yield target, and what we can do is we can back out those results from it, and then that'll help us give a recommendation to the grower for what he should apply to get to that yield goal. And one other really neat thing about this test is that it takes into account the crop stage. So what it can do is it can show us here at our V4 corn, roughly it's going to say I need so much pounds of N to get to the end of season for this crop.
That's right, Jevin. And what we can also do with this test, if we can determine the zones in the field properly with the customer's help, is we can determine different rates of removal or loss in the field throughout the season. So in a field like this, where we've had a little bit of flooding on one end or some pooling of water, we can create an area in those zones, sample them differently than we would, say, a knoll or a very high productive area in the field, and make 2 or 3 different recommendations, and we can track to see what the nitrogen has done under those different stresses that have been on the crop throughout the growing season. So Jevin, let's open this up and show what's inside so we can get a closer look of the technology and how it works. So we'll just discard this sample and I'll dump out the deionized water here. And what's inside is this tea bag type resin ball with a whole bunch of little tiny resin particles inside of it. So I'm going to pull apart this resin bead to show everybody what's actually inside of it. So as you can see, it's just a really tough screen casing, but inside you start to see all these nice, well-soaked, absorbed, tiny little balls of resin. They're only about the size of a sugar crystal. And each of these tiny little sugar crystals or resin beads gives us all kinds of surface area for the molecules to attach to and diffuse into. So when they get to the lab, they can be pulled back off and actually measured to give us the results we need to make a recommendation.